lost my husband in a car accident. I lost my son in the Middle East War. At 62, I thought I had endured every kind of pain a human heart could bear. I believed I had gone numb, that nothing could break me anymore. But that day, right in the middle of Denver, when I lifted my eyes and saw a Doberman puppy, so thin his ribs pushed sharp beneath his paper-thin skin, dangling in the sky from a cluster of white balloons, my heart shattered all over again. Around his neck swung a small sign, flapping in the wind, scrawled in hurried black letters. "You made me do this." I froze. Someone, somewhere, had turned that fragile little life into a weapon of hatred, and I knew, if I turned my back, he would die right in front of me, just like the losses I had carried all my life. My name is Margaret Hayes. I am 62 years old, a retired high school teacher. All my life I lived within the lines of duty, at the chalkboard, and at the small home where I once had a husband, a son. Now the house on the edge of Denver holds only me and long stretches of silence. Every morning I go to the city park, not to exercise like everyone else, but to hear the wind, to smell damp grass, to remind myself that I still belong to this world. That's how I keep my heart beating, even though inside it is riddled with empty spaces. That day, Denver's sky was startlingly clear. The air was crisp, the noon sun flashing across a wide blue canvas. I sat on a wooden bench beneath the shade of an old maple tree, a paper cup of coffee steaming in my hands. Around me, children's laughter rang out. Families spread picnic blankets across the grass, and joggers glided past with earbuds locked in. The scene carried the look of a peaceful, vibrant city. Yet the older I've grown, the more I believe peace is often no more than a thin coat of paint, hiding the dark corners we don't want to face. And sure enough, a sudden silence fell, swallowing all familiar sound. At first I only thought it strange. Why had the laughter, the voices, cut off so abruptly? Then I noticed where everyone was looking. A whole cluster of people had stopped, standing still, heads tilted upward, eyes fixed as if spellbound by something in the sky. My heart thudded. I knew that silence, the kind that draped funeral services. I knew those stunned eyes, the ones I'd seen on people who had just lost someone. And in that moment, I knew something terrible was unfolding. I pushed through the crowd, my hand trembling as I touched the shoulder of a young woman who was covering her mouth, sobbing. Then I lifted my own eyes, and I saw. A massive cluster of white balloons floated higher in the wind. They were beautiful, absurdly so, like a man-made cloud glowing in the sunlight. But when I squinted, when the light revealed the tiny shape hanging beneath them, my breath caught hard in my chest. It wasn't a toy. It wasn't an art display. It was a living being, so small the breeze itself looked ready to rip him apart. The little puppy, frail to the point of horror, paddled his tiny legs helplessly in the air. He didn't bark, didn't cry, only jerked his small head again and again as though struggling to breathe. Under the thin black and tan fur, his bones stood out, jutting so sharply they seemed about to break through skin. Around his neck, the cardboard sign swung, and when the sunlight struck it, I read every word. "You made me do this." A chill ripped through me. Those letters sliced open memories of the losses that had stolen my family. I could hear blood rushing in my ears, my hands shaking so badly I almost spilled the coffee. And then something I thought I had lost forever, fierce, burning outrage, rose in me. "No," I whispered, my throat tight. "I will not let him die like this. Not in front of me. Not again." The crowd around me stood frozen like statues. No more children's laughter, no more music from portable speakers. Not even the sparrows in the maple branches made a sound. Every pair of eyes clung to the sky above, where the massive cluster of balloons drifted like a nightmare. I heard a faint sob beside me, then a man's voice, choked and broken. "Oh God, who could do something like this?" The question hung in the air. No one answered. The young woman in front of me pressed both hands over her mouth, tears slipping between her fingers. A little boy clutched his father's hand, his eyes wide with terror. All of their faces, shocked, enraged, afraid, mirrored exactly what was spiraling inside my chest. I lifted my eyes again. The tiny puppy swung helplessly, her frail body shuddering in the wind. Her small legs kicked at nothing, as if trying to find ground that would never come. Even from that distance, I could see the fur on her chest matted, maybe from a wound, maybe from dirt. She was only a baby, an innocent creature who had never truly lived, now thrown into death as if for someone's amusement. The sunlight caught the cardboard sign around her neck. The black letters stood out, trembling in the wind. "You made me do this." I read each word as though a knife carved it into my heart. I knew, deep inside those words, someone was being targeted. This wasn't ordinary cruelty toward an animal. This was a message, a sentence written in malice. And the puppy was nothing more than an innocent victim, a tool for someone's twisted hatred. My heart hammered so hard it felt ready to tear my chest apart. The pressure climbed into my throat. I had seen flag-draped coffins, had heard bad news carried across battlefields, had lived through the counting of bodies. But what I saw today, it was beyond cruelty. It was evil, calculated, staged, and displayed to crush the human spirit. A man in the crowd muttered, "Has anyone called the police yet?" Another voice, trembling, answered, "They won't get here in time. It's rising too fast." Those words struck me like the ticking of a clock. And it was true. With every second, the little Doberman floated higher. With her body so frail, how much longer could she last before suffocating, or before the balloons burst and sent her crashing to the ground? I clenched my hands so tight my nails dug into my palms until it hurt. From the deepest part of me, a voice rose. Not the voice of a retired teacher, not the voice of a widow grown old, but the voice of a mother who had lost her child, a woman who knew too well what it meant to watch life slip away right before her eyes. "No, I will not let her die like this. Not again." I looked around. The crowd only stood there, shackled by fear and horror. No one dared to move. And I realized, sometimes tragedy doesn't happen just because of evil acts, but because good people stand still. I stepped forward, my own voice ringing louder than I thought possible. "Don't just stand there. Can't you see she's dying? If we stay silent, then we are killing her too." Every gaze snapped to me. Some eyes widened, others pressed lips tight. But I didn't care. I had no time left to weigh their reactions. Every instinct in me screamed to act now. And in that instant, I noticed him. A man standing apart from the crowd near the parking lot. Unlike every terrified face around us, he wasn't looking up. He stood still, phone in hand, the camera lens aimed at the crowd. He was recording these faces, twisted in pain, as if that was the scene he wanted to keep. Ice poured through my veins. He didn't look up. He looked at us, at me. And I knew the person behind all of this might be standing right in front of me. I stood in the middle of the crowd, my eyes locked on the tiny shape dangling above us, my heart tightening with every second. The little Doberman wasn't fighting as hard anymore. Her legs kicked weakly, her movements growing slower, more scattered. Her small head drooped, then jerked up again, driven only by the faintest instinct to survive. She was running out of strength. A cold fear slid down my spine. What if she stopped kicking? What if she gave up? Around me, every face was turned skyward. Some people were crying. Others held up their phones to record. I saw a little boy choke on his sobs in his father's arms, asking over and over, "Daddy, why isn't anyone saving her? Why isn't anyone doing anything?" That question cut through me like a blade. Why indeed? Why were we all standing here, nothing more than spectators in this cruel play? I heard a man behind me whisper, "There's nothing we can do. She's too high already." And a woman's voice, thick with tears, answered, "All we can do now is pray." Pray. I had prayed too much in my life. I had prayed for my husband to come home after the accident, for my son to survive the war. But prayer was never enough. God doesn't always reach down in time. Sometimes it has to be us, flesh and blood, hands and heart, who act. I clenched my fists, nails biting deep into my palms until they burned. I could hear the rush of blood in my ears, mixing with the defeated whispers of the crowd. The image of that tiny dog blurred with the memories inside me. Flag-draped coffins, young soldiers falling in the desert. Too many times I had stood powerless, able only to watch. But today I still had legs, still had arms, still had a chance, however fragile. I glanced at the crowd again. The man in the hoodie near the parking lot was still there, his phone aimed at us, not at the sky. My stomach turned with disgust. He didn't care whether the puppy lived or died. He only cared about the anguish on our faces. He, or someone with him, had strung up that fragile life just to torment. I whispered, almost to myself, "No, I won't let him win. I won't let this pain become his spectacle." My body shook, but a strength long buried began to rise. I stepped forward into the center of the circle. I lifted my head, eyes to the sky, then turned to the people around me. "Listen to me!" My voice rang out, so strong it startled even me. "We cannot just stand here and watch her die. If we stay silent, we are just as guilty as the one who did this." The crowd stirred. Some people dropped their eyes. Some looked directly at me. But they still hesitated, shackled by fear. I drew in a deep breath and let the words pour out straight from my heart. I lost my husband. I lost my son. I know what it is to watch life vanish and be powerless to stop it. Believe me, that will haunt you forever. Today we have a chance to save a life that has no voice. Don't turn away. Silence fell. Only the wind moved through the leaves above us. Then, from the crowd, a man with graying hair stepped forward. His faded uniform said everything before his lips moved. A veteran. He looked at me, nodded slowly, and said, "You're right. We have to try." His words were like a spark thrown on dying coals. A few others nodded, hesitant steps edging forward. My heartbeat steadied. I was no longer alone. Above us, the little dog still trembled, weak and fading. But inside me, for the first time in years, something fierce took root, a fragile hope. We would find a way. And I whispered, as a promise to her and to myself, "You will not die today. Not in front of me. I promise." Once I had spoken, there was no turning back. The entire crowd turned toward me, as if waiting for an explanation, a plan. I felt the weight of dozens of eyes pressing onto my shoulders, and part of me wanted to shrink away. I wasn't a police officer. I wasn't a rescue worker. I was just a retired school teacher. But when I looked up at that tiny life drifting closer to death, I knew. No one else, only me, had to do something. The veteran laid his weathered, calloused hand on my shoulder. "My name's Bill," he said softly. "We can do this, but we'll need tools." I scanned the park. Then, like a spark in the dark, I saw it. At the edge of the lawn, a group of teenagers gathered around a practice bow. They had been using it to shoot rubber-tipped arrows for fun. I ran toward them, my heart pounding. "Let me borrow this," I gasped, grabbing the bow. The kids froze, wide-eyed, until one boy stammered, "Ma'am, what are you going to do?" I gripped the bow tight and lifted my chin. Save a life. My hands trembled as I pulled the string, the little arrow vibrating violently. It had been decades since I'd held any kind of weapon. These hands knew chalk and blackboards, not life and death. I inhaled deeply, forcing calm. Bill stood beside me, his voice steady as stone. "Aim for the outer edge, farthest from her. You can do this." The wind howled above. My heart pounded like a war drum. I raised the bow, drew my aim, and pulled in a slow breath. All sound around me vanished, leaving only me, the arrow, and the cluster of white balloons drifting farther into the sky. I let go. The arrow hissed through the air. Then, pop! One balloon burst, then another beside it. The crowd gasped, heads tilting higher. The cluster jolted, swayed, dipped. But there were still dozens left, more than enough to keep the puppy suspended. "Not enough," I panted, sweat dripping down my temple. The little Doberman jerked at the noise, her tiny legs flailing in panic. A weak whimper broke free, and it split my heart in two. Bill gripped my shoulder, his eyes blazing. "Try again. This time, aim for the center." I shook my head, horrified. "If I miss, I could hit her." He locked eyes with me. "If you don't, she'll die for sure. Don't let fear decide. Let your heart lead." I pulled the bowstring once more. My hands shook like they carried fire, but I steadied myself and aimed for the thick center of the balloon cluster. I drew in a breath, then released. And as I did, I whispered to myself, "You will not die. Not while I'm here." I let go. Pop, pop, pop. A rapid-fire chain of explosions as balloons burst like white snowflakes raining down. The cluster buckled, spun wildly. And then, the little Doberman began to fall. The crowd screamed. I dropped the bow and shouted, "Blanket! We need a blanket, now!" A nearby family jolted into action. The father tore away their picnic spread, yanking a red and white checkered blanket off the grass. He and his wife sprinted toward me, their faces stricken but determined. Bill and I grabbed two corners, they seized the others, and we stretched it tight. "Hold firm! Don't let go!" I cried, my hands trembling but locked in place. Above us, the puppy spun downward, falling fast like a heavy broken leaf. Time slowed. I could see every detail, her tiny legs curling, her eyes squeezed shut, her little mouth open in silence. My heart pleaded, "Please, let her have a chance." Thud! The impact slammed into my hands, a shock so fierce my arms went numb. The blanket sagged dangerously, nearly tearing. The crowd surged, bracing the corners. I clenched my teeth, gripping with every ounce of strength, sweat pouring from me like rain. And then, silence. The Doberman lay curled in the center of the blanket, so small, trembling. A fragile bundle of black and tan fur, damp with sweat and streaked with blood. She could no longer move, only breathe in short, shallow gasps. I sank to my knees, gently placing my hand near her nose, whispering through tears, "You don't have to fly alone anymore. You're on the ground now. You have me." The crowd exhaled in unison, a wave of relief breaking through. But even in that fragile moment of victory, I knew this was only the beginning. that life was still as delicate as a candle in the wind, and we would have to race against time to keep her here, in this world. I held the tiny body tight against my chest. She was so light it terrified me, as if the wind could carry her away again if I loosened my grip. I felt every rapid, broken breath, like a candle about to flicker out. Blood seeped from a wound in her front leg, soaking through the fabric of my shirt. "We have to get her to a vet, right now!" I shouted, my voice breaking like a command. A young man pointed frantically toward the far side of the park. "There's a clinic less than 10 minutes from here." I didn't hesitate. Bill, the veteran, took the lead. The crowd parted, clearing a path. A woman thrust her car keys forward. "Take my car! Go!" I stumbled toward her, choking out thanks through tears, then climbed into the back seat with the puppy still cradled in my arms. Bill slid behind the wheel and slammed his foot on the gas. The car tore through Denver's streets, horns blaring in our wake. I bent low, whispering into the fragile ear of that small life. "Don't leave me. You've touched the ground now. You have to live. You have to see tomorrow." At every turn, her body shuddered faintly. Her tiny chest rose and fell in uneven waves, her half-shut eyes twitching. I had never felt so helpless, so desperate. Memories of loss surged. When the phone call came about my husband, when soldiers in uniform handed me a folded flag. I couldn't let that list grow longer. I wouldn't. When the car screeched to a stop at the clinic, I bolted out, nearly screaming, "Emergency! Please, she can't hold on much longer!" A young veterinarian and a nurse rushed out, lifting the Doberman from my arms onto a small stretcher. Their eyes met mine, urgent but steady. "Stay calm. We'll do everything we can." The doors swung shut, leaving Bill and me outside. I sank into a chair, hands clenched together, trembling. The ticking of the wall clock stretched like a sentence. I closed my eyes and whispered, a prayer spilling from me. "Lord, I've lost too much already. Please don't take this life from me. She's just a baby. She's never known a warm home. Please, give her a chance." Bill sat beside me, his heavy hand resting on my shoulder. He said nothing, but his silence carried weight. The silence of someone who also knew what loss meant. Time stretched into forever. I heard the clatter of instruments inside, the beeping of monitors, each weak chirp stealing the rhythm of my heart. Every falter in that sound made me stop breathing. A nurse burst out, sweat shining on her face. "We need to drain fluid from her lungs. She's critical." I grabbed her hand, my voice raw. "Please, save her. I don't care what it costs. I just need her to live." The door slammed again. I buried my face in my hands, whispering over and over like a broken hymn, "You are not alone. You are not alone." Suddenly, the machines inside whined louder, faster. My heart leapt to my throat. I jumped to my feet, staring through the small glass window at white coats moving frantically. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 endless minutes. Finally, the door opened. The doctor stepped out, pulling off his mask. His face was exhausted, but his eyes were bright. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, still breathless. "She's going to live." My knees buckled. I covered my mouth as tears flooded out, choking on sobs. My whole body shook, worn down but overflowing with relief. Beside me, Bill let out a long sigh, as though he too had been freed. "We stitched her ribs, drained her lungs. She'll need close monitoring for a few days. But her heart, it's stronger than we thought." I nodded again and again, tears streaming down my face. Inside my chest, a space I thought had gone dark forever sparked with hope. I whispered, my voice breaking with trembling faith. "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for letting me keep a piece of love in this world. After the surgery, I sat for hours beside the glass kennel in the recovery ward. The little Doberman, now just a fragile bundle of fur wrapped in bandages, lay struggling for breath beneath a thin blanket. Each time her tiny chest rose and fell, I felt my own heart rising and falling with it. I called her Grace because I believed her survival was not only medicine, but grace itself. As night fell, a young police officer tapped lightly on the waiting room door. He introduced himself as Officer Daniel Perez from the Denver Police Department. His face was stern, his eyes burning with restrained anger. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "we need to hear everything you witnessed at the park." I told him every detail: the balloons, the scrawled sign, the silent crowd, and the suspicious man near the parking lot, the one in the hoodie, phone pointed at us instead of the sky. I could never forget his eyes, cold, empty, a man who fed on the suffering of others. Perez scribbled quickly, then looked up. "Can you describe him more specifically? Height, build, anything you remember?" I closed my eyes, drawing the moment back. He was about 6 feet tall, thin build, dark gray hoodie, faded jeans, and one more thing. The shoes, white sneakers, but the heels were dirty, with dried mud. Perez's eyes lit up. He nodded firmly. "That's enough to match against our records. Mrs. Hayes, you've just given us a crucial piece of the puzzle." The next day, I received a call from Perez. They had traced the lead, a man named Kevin Dolan, 32 years old, with a history of animal abuse. His ex-girlfriend had just filed for a restraining order. She was Grace's legal owner. A chill ran through me. So it was true. The sign, "You made me do this," was aimed directly at her. Grace had been turned into a weapon in his sick revenge. 3 days later, the police asked me to come identify the suspect. They led me into an observation room with one-way glass. On the other side sat Kevin Dolan, arms crossed, eyes darting, his gaunt face still twisted with arrogance. On his feet, white sneakers, heels smeared with dirt, just as I remembered. I heard him shouting into the air, "She ruined my life. I just wanted her to know what loss feels like." Every word he spewed made my blood boil. He felt no remorse, only blame. In my mind, I saw Grace trembling in that blanket, gasping after her fall, and tears spilled before I could stop them. Perez glanced at me, his voice quiet. "Mrs. Hayes, are you certain this is the man you saw at the park?" I drew a long breath, then nodded firmly. "It's him. Those eyes. That look. I'll never forget it." My confirmation was enough to solidify the case. The very next day, the news broke. Kevin Dolan was arrested on charges of severe animal cruelty, violation of a restraining order, and endangering the community. That evening, I returned to the recovery ward. Grace was still weak, but when I sat down, she opened her eyes just a little, her faint brown gaze meeting mine. I pressed my hand against the glass and whispered, "You don't have to be afraid anymore, Grace. The man who hurt you will never touch you again. Justice will take care of the rest." A tear fell onto my hand, burning hot. But this time, it wasn't despair. It was released. In that moment, I understood something simple. Justice doesn't only come from courts or police. Justice begins the moment an ordinary person, a widowed woman, a gray-haired veteran, or anyone at all, chooses not to turn away from suffering. And that choice had changed everything. The day Grace was discharged, the Denver sky was bright blue, as if it wanted to welcome a new beginning. I remember that morning clearly, when the veterinarian handed me the adoption papers. My hands trembled, but my heart beat stronger than it had in years. "Are you sure?" the vet asked, his eyes full of concern. I nodded, my voice breaking. "I'm not just sure. I need this. We need each other." As I signed my name, Grace lifted her head, peeking at me through the bandages wrapped around her chest. Her eyes, still tinged with fear, carried a faint glimmer, as if she understood this was no longer a stopover. It was home. I brought her back to my little wooden house on the edge of town, a place that had echoed only with the ticking of clocks and the hollow breath of a widow living alone. That day, for the first time in years, I heard the click of small paws on the wooden floor, the quiet sigh of another soul sharing the space. The house was no longer empty. The first weeks were not easy. Grace carried nightmares with her. At night she curled tight, whimpering, her little paws scratching at the air as if she were still dangling above the earth. Each time I left my bed and lay on the floor beside her, my hand resting gently on her bony back. I whispered, "You're safe now, Grace. You've touched the ground. You're home." Slowly the trembling eased. In its place came soft sighs of relief, and sometimes the peaceful breathing of a child in deep sleep. One morning, I opened the porch door to sunlight spilling in, and there was Grace, waiting, her tail flicking softly. She didn't bark, she didn't whine, just her eyes were enough. Eyes that told me she was grateful, that she forgave, that she trusted. And every time I looked into them, I felt as if I, too, had been saved. Neighbors began to stop by. They brought dog food, little collars, and repeated, "We've never seen anyone as brave as you." I only smiled, stroking Grace's head. The truth was, I didn't feel brave. I only knew one thing. If I had turned away, my heart would have died with her. And I refused to live another day like that. 3 months later, Grace was stronger. Her black and tan coat gleamed, her frame filled out. She ran across the backyard, ears perked at the sound of birds. Once, when I sat on my wooden chair, she leapt up, lay her head in my lap, and breathed steadily. Tears slid down my cheeks, dripping into her soft fur. I whispered, "You don't know this, Grace, but you're the one who saved me." When I look back on it all, the park, the crowd, the balloons, the terrible sign, I don't see just pain anymore. I see it as a turning point. The day a widowed woman who thought she had lost everything found her beating heart again. The day a dying puppy found a home to live in. Now, when I walk the narrow path into the park, Grace runs beside me, her legs strong and sure. People often stop and ask, "Is that the dog from—" I just smile and say, "Yes, this is Grace. She survived. And she taught me how to survive in my own way." I know life will always be full of loss, but Grace reminds me that love never truly disappears. It only waits for a chance to be reborn, sometimes through a small, voiceless creature. And in that silence I hear a message clearer than any words. We are redeemed when we learn how to love once more. I look up at the Denver sky where those balloons once turned into a nightmare. Today, only white clouds drift peacefully. I glance down at Grace, tears warming my smile. We made it, my girl. On the ground, safe, together. I sit here, Grace curled at my feet, her small breaths rising and falling like a lullaby. Watching her sleep, I remember the day she hung in the air, fragile, as if she'd never touch the earth again. And now she lies safe in my home, her heart beating in rhythm with mine. Maybe for the rest of my life, I will never forget the moment she licked my hand, as if forgiving, as if trusting, even after humanity had thrown her into such cruelty. If such a small soul can choose forgiveness, can we, humans, choose to love more? I want to ask you, whoever is listening to this story, have you ever saved a dog's life? If you have, tell us your story. Share it, so together we can spread love, so no living soul is ever abandoned, lonely, or left dangling between life and death again. Because love, when given, doesn't just save a dog, it saves a human heart too.